Hello and welcome back to my channel. This is Afri Abundance. In today's live video, I'm going to be covering some information that I have been studying when it comes to my ancestry and my maternal lineage that, as many of you may have seen here on my channel, I have discussed what my results were, and I'm going to be sharing more about that and just some historical history when it comes to Sierra Leone, Mende land, as many know it as originally. So this information I have gathered from Encyclopaedia Africana.com. And they have lots of really good historical information about various countries across the world. So as you can see here, these are all of the other countries that you can get historical information from. So I'm just going to go through some things here that really stood out to me, especially learning about the different tribes that live there, the tribes that are native to the land. There's just so much that I've been learning, and I'm very excited to share all of those things. So I'm just going to go through and read some of these topics with you all here. So the first one that I'm going to get into here is called the connotations of Sierra Leone. And for anyone who knows any history behind this country, it was named Sierra Leone by a Portuguese colonizer. So Sierra Leone is not the indigenous name of this country. So I'm just going to read some information when it comes to their history, things of that nature. So this is the connotations of Sierra Leone. Historically, the term Sierra Leone bears different connotations in the minds of many. The present political boundaries of Sierra Leone, like those of all African countries, are a product of European imperialism. In the 15th century, Sierra Leone was the name given to the mountainous peninsula by the Portuguese, who are said to have been the first Europeans to land here. After the establishment of a British colony in this peninsula, in the late 18th century, the name Sierra Leone came to refer to that colony. Up until the late 19th century, the colony was gradually extended by treaties purporting to cede certain adjacent areas and islands to the British. These areas included the Sherbo, parts of Koya country, Bunce, Banana, and Tasso Islands, and the estuary of the Roquel River. The Sierra Leone of today came to include what was referred to in the 19th century as the hinterland, or the interior of the colony. The hinterland spilled over present-day boundaries to include places like Futa Jalon and Melakuri areas, where the British continued to exert considerable influence until the 1890s. The boundaries were demarcated by agreements between the governments of Britain, France, and Liberia beginning in 1895. The present boundaries were finally ratified in 1917. So I find it very interesting that even to this day, Sierra Leone still has this name, and I would very much love to see in my lifetime these names being removed from their beautiful countries where their indigenous names were stripped off. But I'm just going to keep reading through some of the background history because this is one of the most interesting stories that really hit home for me, because this is, where a lot of my maternal lineage came from. So a lot of these things are very deep ancestrally, and it's been quite a journey to really unfold myself as a Mende woman. So I'm going to go ahead and read into this next part here. This is about migration and settlement. So I'm going to read it here. The geographical area of present-day Sierra Leone, before the foundation of the colony, included a number of ethnic groups, widely dispersed over its mountains and plains. Among the oldest inhabitants of the coastal area are the Bolom. Together with other ethno-linguistically related West Atlantic groups, such as the Gola in the south, the Kissi in the east, and the Baga and Nalu in the northeast. The traditions of the Temne, another early group, though apparently not so long established as the others named, indicate that they came from Fula Jalon, or Futa Jalon, the mountainous region in what is now Guinea, having been driven from there by warlike neighbors. They gradually spread southwards from the Scarces Valley, coming to live beside the coastal Baga. A reorganization of these coastal groups occurred due to the invasion of a Mende-speaking people called the Mani in the middle of the 16th century, which also gave rise to the largest ethnic group in Sierra Leone, the Mende. The Mani were a Mandinka group emanating from the Mali Empire, whose leader, a queen named Masarico, is said to have been exiled by the Mansa king of Mali. Masarico led her followers first southwards, then westwards until they finally made a base in the Cape Mount area of Liberia. By the 1540s from this area, their armies were sent out to subjugate most parts of the present-day Sierra Leone hinterland, thereby creating sub-kingdoms owing allegiance to the parent one. Often, if the sub-kingdom's country, the eastern, let me make sure I've got the right page here. Okay, here we go. Sub-kingdoms. Often, if the sub-kingdoms country, let's see here. Make sure I've got the right page. Excuse me, my pages are out of order in this section. Okay, there we go. Okay. Often, if the sub-kingdoms failed to recognize their obligation to the headquarters at Cape Mount, a further invasion was sent against such entities. Thus, successive waves of many invasions, sometimes 20 years apart, led to further settlement and often the creation of a new ethnic group. So I think it's very interesting when it comes to this country specifically, because there are so many different groups of people. And even when I look at my maternal lineage and I say, okay, I know that the Mende were not indigenous to this part of the continent. Who were our people even before Mende became that group? I'm not sure if that's something that, is traceable, but I think it would be very interesting to know, how did our people, become the Mende? Where did they actually begin? Because, like it says here, there's a lot of different subgroups, and it's just so interesting how diverse the country is with the different types of people. Like, it was stated here, the Mende were created from the Malian Empire, and those Malian, peoples, Mandinka, came down to that region and thus cohabitated with other tribes of people. So it's definitely very interesting. It also gives you here just some run-throughs of all of the different people, the Temne, who they were, the Loco, the Sherbo, the Yalunka, the more kind of unknown groups that you won't really get a lot of information about. the Vai, and then it'll talk about the European context, the founding of the Sierra Leone colony. So I'm just going to go ahead and read through this section here just to give kind of some background information because, as I've stated in a few of my other videos, in terms of what you name something, a lot comes with a name. And the name Sierra Leone comes with a colonial infrastructure. So I think it's very important for people to understand, well, it's not just about, if they don't like it, just change it. There is an infrastructure behind it. There is a lot more that went into it to even create it to be what it is. So I think it's very important, as someone who is very much a Pan-Africanist, to understand that there was a lot more that went into it, and it wasn't just a choice to allow it to be changed. It was a lot of struggle. It was a lot of, back and forth power shifts when it came to changing what the indigenous names were for these peoples and my peoples in general. So it states here, while all these developments were taking place in the interior, Europeans were establishing links with the peninsula, which eventually culminated in the establishment of the colony of Sierra Leone in 1787. Portuguese explorers were stopping at the peninsula as early as the middle of the 15th century, and the estuary of the Sierra Leone Raquel River quickly became known as a fine natural harbor and a place for obtaining fresh water. More regular contacts were established through trade, with gold, ivory, and more especially slaves being exchanged by the local inhabitants for European manufactured goods. Between 1482 and 1495, the Portuguese built a fort on the site of modern Freetown, where their traders settled. Some Portuguese then went inland and took African wives. The offspring of such unions came to constitute a privileged group of traders and factors. Attempts were also made by the Portuguese to convert the Africans to Christianity. Father Balthazar Barrera of the Roman Catholic Jesuit order came to Sierra Leone in 1605. He was well received and allowed to build a church near Crew Bay, in the vicinity of modern Freetown. His attempts to convert the Soso were, however, a complete failure, and he left disappointed in 1610. Subsequent attempts throughout the 17th century similarly met with failure. By the end of the century, regular mission work had been given up completely. So I think it's very interesting how they also give you information in regards to how they used religion, how they, took African wives and really, changed the whole basis of these people. And I feel that there's just so much more that goes into it being slavery. Some people have these opinions that slavery was a choice, that Africans sold other Africans, so that makes it justifiable. But I feel like all of these things went into creating that slave system. All of these things are going to have to be re-unfolded in order for our mother continent to be free in the way that we want and need her to be. So I really do support the, African Unite movement that we have going on right now. Being somebody who is very well versed in what's going on across the continent, I feel that it is very important for African leaders to stand up together and say, my people were affected just as much as your people were affected. How can we fix this? How can we retake what was already acclaimed as ours? So I feel like knowing this type of history is where you start, and understanding, oh, well, this is how it was written. How do we unwrite this and make it our own again? So that was a really good piece of history there. And then there's one more section here that is really helpful to understand as well. It talks a lot about the political organizations. There's a lot of politics when it comes to slavery. But I'm going to read here a section that talks about the recaptives. As many people know, there was a lot of movement back and forth within Sierra Leone, and there were a lot of slaves who were technically considered not slaves, and they were free people who were enslaved, and then they were released and returned back to Freetown as free people. So I think understanding recaptives is something that will also give a lot of context to the fact that this country was supposed to be under the free people's sort of clause, so to speak. So the recaptives. The British squadron patrolled the whole West African coast and brought offending ships to Freetown, as the capital Sierra Leone had been named in 1792. In Freetown, after adjudication, the captives were set free. These people, first captured and enslaved, then recaptured on the high seas, and subsequently freed, were known as recaptives of liberated Africans. They added a new element in the population of that of the original westernized settlers. Many of the recaptives were of Yoruba origin, but there were others from the Congo and elsewhere, and even from Kisi recaptives from Sierra Leone itself. These were settled in places surrounding the colony, which often bore the names of their areas of origin. Eventually, thousands of recaptives, more than 40,000 by 1850, swelled the colony's population. Many villages were founded where recaptives usually practiced their original modes of living. Largely through thrift and industry, many of the recaptives broke into the snobbish and hitherto exclusive domain of the settlers of Freetown. They became wealthy through trade, bought property in Freetown, intermarried with the settlers, became Christians, and assumed some Western habits. By the second half of the 19th century, this breaking into the preserve of the settlers had ushered in a fusion of the two groups, recaptives and settlers, to give rise to the Creoles, or as we know, Creole meaning similar to the Creoles that we have in the United States here that inhabit the Louisiana areas. They are natives to the Creole people, Krio. And I find that part of history to be very interesting as well. Creole from Sierra Leone and Creoles that are in the United States have a lot of ties to this group of people as well. Creole culture became a fusion of the indigenous customs of the recaptives, mainly Yoruba, and westernized habits of the settlers, coupled with missionary and Victorian values brought in through the colonial experience. So I find it really disheartening and very interesting that a lot of people that come from this country were basically pushed back and forth when it came to the slave trade. They were enslaved, then they were considered free, and then they were re-enslaved. So I think for a lot of African Americans and Black people, in the diaspora, I think it's really important to understand that our people have been through some very cruel and dehumanizing things that have completely demolished what the continent looks like now in present day. I mean, there are a lot of good things, not to overlook the good things that are going on, but understanding mentally why our people are so broken. Can you imagine being someone who was enslaved and then attaining your freedom and then being re-enslaved and being re-tortured over and over again throughout history? I find that to be the most crippling fact to really understand, that our people were just taken back and forth by groups and groups of people over and over again. And I feel like there's even more of a reason to be a Pan-Africanist and understand that you have to stand with your people. There's no reason for you to be anti-Black and not care about your African brothers and sisters and the things that are going on, within the continent right now with them. We have to care. These things are very destabilizing. Can you imagine being treated this way and then expected to act like nothing has happened to you as a human? I just feel like this history, like I said, since it hits home, it just really touches my spirit. And I feel like it's really good to keep yourself informed, to really know what really was happening. Removing from your mind this ideology that we chose to be slaves, and then justifying saying Africans sold Africans when they were forced to make a deal with someone. So I feel like if you're ever looking for any type of platforms where you want to actually learn factual information, these aren't just made up things that cannot be backed by historical findings and text. This is definitely a great website that you can look through any country within the continent and learn truth and bring that truth to light, for the sake of your people. Like I said, this is very close to me, so that's why I am very passionate about getting an understanding of who my foremothers were, and why um, they survived as long as they did, and also why um, we were basically told to remove who we were from our minds, and it didn't carry on through families. So I feel like this is really important for anyone who enjoys this type of content within the diaspora. I definitely have a lot of web-based forums where you can find, great information. So I hope you all enjoyed this live today. As I stated before, I am a heartfelt and, 10 toes down Pan Africanist who stands with our people. I won't tolerate any anti Blackness, anti African, these two words that get thrown around here on my channel. That's not what I'm here for. I'm here to lift the weight. I'm here to invite our ancestors and our people back to who we are, and in a loving manner, and not in a degrading way. So if you enjoy my content, I definitely appreciate it. Give this video 2 thumbs up, comment, and subscribe to my channel for more DIYs, recipes, and reviews. Thank you so much for watching.